Hello. I'd like to take a minute and talk to you about some early church history. Not a scholar on the matter, just know a few things which I think everybody should be familiar with. I'd like to talk to you about a few points along the way between the year 0, when Jesus was born roughly, and the year 2000-ish now. Two significant points. One is the Protestant Reformation, which occurred roughly in the 16th century. The year 1517, Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses, and he and many other men were involved in it. And my point here, on this notable point of history is what went in and what came out. What were people before and what were people after? Before, you were a Catholic. If you were any sort of Christian, you were a Catholic. And what came out was many other denominations, Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians and so on. And so that's a significant point in history. And the other significant point in history I wanted to point out was the 3rd and 4th century. In the year 313, Constantine, along with other leaders, issued an edict which represented religious freedom, the Edict of Milan, and it preferred Christianity, although it gave religious freedom to many religions. And Constantine's mom was a Christian. Constantine himself was not a Christian. Constantine himself was a pagan worshiper of the sun. I've seen documents say that he was a high priest of such. Constantine remained not a Christian all the while. He saw the value in Christianity. I would say conjecturally that he as a leader may have preferred Christianity because it catered to a group of people who were submissive. And but I don't want to get into many conjectural things, but historically, 313, we have religious freedom. We have people who were persecuted, sometimes even to the point of death, and now we have people who are free. We have people who before, if they went up to a Roman soldier and that Roman soldier discovered they were Christian, they would have been in some manner of trouble. But now they go up to the Roman soldier and say, hey, I'm a Christian. He goes, cool, that's all right with him. Now, what happens? What changes in your thinking? You're no longer clawing for survival. Now you're trying to figure out what you believe. And obviously that was a problem. In the year 325, Constantine called the Council of Nicaea. And at the Council of Nicaea, he called like 320 some odd priests and so on to try to figure out, because there was a problem. The problem was they couldn't figure out what to think of Jesus. And the Arian controversy, Arius was not a priest, I don't think, but he was obviously a religious teacher, and a lot of people believed what he said. And Arius he believed that Jesus was some sort of lesser God and he wasn't eternal, and I'm not real familiar with all his teachings, but there was the majority of that council anyway. I don't know if it was a majority, actual majority of the kingdom, or actual majority of Christians, but the majority of the people at that council, they believed that Jesus was eternal and equal in every way. And the interesting thing, Constantine, he was involved. He didn't get up and talk all the time, but there was a point in recorded history where he got up and he fussed at Arius so much to the point where no one they dared to profess pure Arianism from then on. So he was involved. He did influence. He set the council up. He invited the people. He took care of them, and he himself, I believe it was, he suggested a philosophical word which was crucial, because part of the problem was, these people, they would come up with a document and say, okay, this is it. We believe that Jesus is, God. He's of the same, he is God, and I don't know how, and they would write this document and they would give it to other people to sign, and other people would go, you know what, I could interpret this way and this that way, and they kind of weasel out, and they'd say, okay, I'm okay with this if I interpret it the way I think. And that would just infuriate them, make them mad. And so then that's whenever, I believe, Constantine, you can check me on this, but he suggested this thing that had been floating around, the word consubstantial, the word which meant that Jesus was of the same stuff as the Father. This is where they say that philosophy proved itself the true handmaid of theology, because there wasn't any words found in what they call the Holy Scriptures, there wasn't a full Bible back then. There were scriptures floating around, but they couldn't find it anywhere, so they went to philosophy, Greek philosophy, and they got this word consubstantial. And so then they put that word there and they said, now you read this and try to get out of it. And they took it home, I guess, and they put a little O in that word consubstantial, and it changed its meaning from the same stuff as the Father as to similar stuff as the Father. And they signed it and they sent it back to them, and they said, okay, but they got found out, and in the end they got banished. So they were banished. And a few years later, Constantine changes his mind, and the other people were banished, and they brought the banished people back. And things went back and forth. And 56 years later, in the year 381, there was another leader on the scene. His name was Theodosius, and he preferred the Christianity of the First Council of Nicaea. And so he, with his power, he moved to make it the standard for his kingdom. He is the government power, moved to make it the standard of his kingdom. And he evidently saw some need to modify it, so he called another council, the Council of Constantinople, I believe it is, and they modified it a little bit. And you can read, if you go online to Wikipedia or somewhere, you can go to the Council of Nicaea comparison of the 325 and 381 creeds, and you'll see they have a nice outline of it where they have inserted parts underlined, and they have parts they struck out with them striking through. And you'll kind of see a motivation in there. You'll notice that the entire end is some sort of anathema, or telling people if they didn't believe what they believe, that they were just wrong. And so they struck all that part because that was a big focus back then, that they wanted everybody to believe what they believed about Jesus. And at this point in 381, they won. They won the battle already because Theodosius said they won. And so they took that out because that seemed a little bit unnecessary at this point. And they revised it, and then they said you can't change it anymore, and that was the standard. Now what I want to say is this. We talked about the year 1600. What went into the Protestant Reformation and what came out of the Protestant Reformation was not the same thing. And what went in this year, we'll call it 350. What when this time in 350 and what came out of it, was it the same thing? There was a time right before Theodosius where the kingdom, the majority believed that Jesus, they believed something different about Jesus than what they didn't believe that he was eternal. I'm not necessarily sure about everything, but there was not unity. It was a great division. It was not a minor point where people were gravely, hurt inside that people were believing one way and the other way. And it was a great big deal. It was not a small thing. So what went in and what came out? What did people believe before Constantine came on the scene? And I would say it's not the same thing. We don't see the Trinitarian references back then. We see it strangely absent. And what else do we see? Another thing, real quickly, is the Jewish observances of Passover and the Sabbath and the Feasts of Tabernacles and so on. Where are those today? You will strangely notice in Christianity today, all those are gone. Why and when did it happen? It happened then. At the same time, at that first council, one of the other main things they wanted to do was to figure out and to state certainly that the Passover observance would never coincide with their observance, which they call Easter. Now Easter, pagan, with a lot of other holidays, it's pagan. So they wanted to distance themselves from the Jewish people. They had a great disdain for those Jewish people. It's very obvious if you read back in historical documents. And another thing is Sabbath. The Sabbath was replaced with Sunday, S-U-N day. Well, that happened also. I mean, it's very, of course it happened then. And Constantine was a worshiper of the S-U-N, sun, and he set that day aside as a day of rest, and it was just a natural thing. The Christians see some relevance to Sunday, that Jesus was resurrected on Sunday. Constantine, he's already happy with it. We'll just jump right here in the middle, and it'll work, because we don't want to observe the Sabbath. And so all this has happened. There's been a great division. What went in and what came out. And I just offer this, some conjectural points, some of it historical points. I'm hoping that most of it is historical, that maybe you could go and study for yourself and see what happened. what happened then? How clear was it? You know, the majority of the documentation you'll read is from a common non-heretical way of thinking, and so you just need to understand. You need to read it. You need to be very objective whenever you read it. So I just want to encourage you to do so, and whatever you find out is you'll be better in the end. Thanks.